In this quick framer tutorial, I'm going to show you how to recreate this really interesting effect from the Inkwell.tech website. As you can see, we just have a circle of images, and as we're hovering around, they are flipping around in 3D, and it looks pretty good. So you're going to learn about components and just, the overall technique that is required to create things like this inside the framer without writing a single line of code. My name is Nandi, this is Framer University, and let's get started. So here we can see the recreated version. This is already in Framer. So as you can see, we are hovering around and we basically see a really not familiar but similar effect. Not exactly the same, but again, it looks pretty similar. So let's just jump inside a framer and start recreating this. I'm going to have a remix link down in the description if you want to follow along, and you should want to follow along because that's how you're going to learn something. Just click the link, remix it, and once you have the project, if you go to the left pages and click the starter page, you're going to see what I'm seeing here, and you can start following along. So I'm going to click tutorial because this is where I'm going to be working. And yeah, let's just start recreating this. I think it's going to be a cool video because you're going to see how simple it is actually to recreate or create an effect like this in Framer, because we don't really need much. We just need little frames, we need little components, and basically that's it. And if we use those little elements in a smart way, we can create creative effects like this in a matter of minutes. So I want to make sure that we start simple. So we're just going to create this little text here first. So the future is built on artificial intelligence. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press T on my keyboard. And I'm going to click here on the desktop breakpoint. And I'm going to write the text here. Once I have the text, I can just press Command A. It will basically select the whole thing. And once I have that, I can go to the right panel and select the fonts and all those stuff that I need. So Space Grotex is going to be the font. I think I'm going to use medium or semi-bold, I'm not sure. Probably medium is enough. I'm going to drop the letter spacing a little bit so letters are going to be a little bit closer to each other. And the size is going to be 14. Yeah, something like this. And I'm going to duplicate it simply. And we're going to write hover to explore. Hover to explore. Here we're going to drop the opacity of this layer a little bit, so maybe 60 or 50%, so it appears a little bit grayish. And then in order to get a little more space between these two text layers, what we can do is we can just select both of them, right click, add stack, or just press the shortcut, Option Command Enter. And as you can see, this wraps these two text layers into a stack, and you can also see that on the left layers panel. So now these two text layers are in this stack, which we can rename to text to keep everything nice and organized. So now we get this little thing here that we can drag to change the spacing between these two. So I'm just going to eyeball it. Probably it's going to be around 6. And I think that's all. That's all we need. Now this is going to be the text within or in the center of this circle. And now let's think about how this effect is created. So what we can see is that on the original, it's a little different because and by the way, this appear effect or this loading animation looks really amazing. But what we are paying attention to here is that how the cards are behaving when we are hovering around. And you can see that when we stop the cursor and we don't even have to hover over the card itself, we can basically have our cursor just around them and it's going to still trigger. And if we stop our cursor, it's just going to stop midway in air. And yeah, now in our version, it's not really the case. It's kind of like, it's like faking the effect a little bit because, if we do this and we're just moving our cursor around, it kind of has the effect. But if you pay close attention, what is happening here is that we have a setup that basically triggers an effect on the card when we hover over it, and it automatically goes back. Okay. Sorry. So it automatically goes back to the default state. So on mouse enter, it gets an interaction. Hey, go up and flip around, and then after a little delay, come back to your original position. And then, you know, this creates an effect that looks something like this if we're really fast hovering around, you know, all of these cards. So yeah, basically that's what we have to do. We have to create one component that is this card component that will be reused for all of these little cards around. We have to create an interaction for that, and then we'll have to figure out a way to put them in a little circle, so they appear in a circle. So that's going to be the steps that we're going to take here. So first, let's just recreate the little card. I'm going to check the size here. I'm going to draw with my screenshotter tool in browser, and it's around 60, 80, something like that. So 60 width and 80 height. If you didn't see what I did, I basically pressed down F on my keyboard and I just drew a frame. Nothing crazy. So maybe I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, maybe 75 and 95. And then the fill color will be gray for now. As you can see, it also has rounded corners. So slightly rounded. We're going to also do that. Slightly round the corners. Let's just have a little more space between these two. So we have this card, it has slightly rounded corners and it has a fair color. Now, if we say that, okay, this is going to be the frame that will have the image, we can also do that. We can probably just copy this image here and paste it here. So what I did is I just right clicked here, copy image, and then here we select the right property here, fill, and switch it to an image. And if we click here and then we start, these are just little tricks that I usually do. So if you click and drag, then it's not going to open your Finder, but it's going to highlight this this input, and you can just press Command and V then, because if you remember, the image was on our clipboard because we copied it from here. So these are just little tricks that can really speed up your workflow. So now we have the image here, but the problem with this is that if we just have this single layer, we're not going to be able to create the interaction for this with the 3D transform and the flipping and everything, because you can see that indeed we can go and set transforms on this single image layer on the right panel, because we can add, let's say, rotate. It's going to 3D rotate. We can also add perspective, so it's going to look sort of like 3D, and it looks all good. However, what we're going to notice is that as soon as we turn this into a component, because eventually we'll have to do that, create component just for testing, just to show you, you can see it doesn't look like this, right? Like it's just weird. And the reason for this is because the variant, the top level variant in any component cannot have transforms. You can see on the right panel, we no longer see transforms. Only elements within the variant can have transforms, as you can see. So the little trick that we have to do is I'm going to remove all these rotations and stuff from the image. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this in a stack. That's basically it. Nothing too crazy. So right click and add stack. I'm going to set it to width fit content and height fit. So fit, and then it will be named little card. That's it. Now this can be a component. So right click the little card and create a component. So now we are on the component canvas. This is where we can set up all the different variants that we need and create the interaction. So our goal here is to create an interaction where we hover over the card, it goes up, flips around, and then automatically, after a little delay, goes back to its default state. So if you think about that, how many states we'll have? We're going to have the default state that we can see right here. We'll have the moved up state where it moves up. And then we're going to have a third state where it, transitioned back into its default state. So variant 1, variant 2, and variant 3. Because if you don't know it already, these are called variants inside of a component. So state 1, variant 1, we can call this actually default. Then if we click here, like we select the default, and then we click here, now you can see a new variant has been generated, and we can just call it moved up. Because on this variant, the image will move up. So how do we achieve that? Well, I just realized that we messed something up, but we're gonna solve that a little bit later. So how do we move it up, and how do we rotate it and do all those crazy things? First of all, I think an easier way to move this around will be to set it to absolute positioning, so we can freely drag it around. Now we cannot really do that. It always jumps back into its relative position. So what I'm going to do instead is on the primary variant. You might be like wondering why Nandi is going back to the primary. Well, because everything that you do on the primary is applied on all the other variants. And when we want to do such fundamental changes, such as restructuring something a little bit or repositioning something, that has to be done on the default primary, so it's applied everywhere. So in order to set this to absolute, first what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the width of the default primary variant to fixed width and fixed height. You might be asking, why do I do that? Well, because now it's fit, which means that it's fitting the element that is within itself. This only works if there is something within set to a relative position, because that's how the parent knows that, okay, I have a relative, child inside of me, and I can fit that. As soon as I set that single element to absolute, there's no relative, there's nothing to fit. And it's not really gonna know what's the size that I have to fit. So that's why we're gonna say, okay, don't try to fit anything, just stay fixed, just stay like that. And then we can freely set the image from relative to absolute, which will allow us to move it around freely. If you want to move it up, we will be able to do that. However, as we move it up, we notice that it's clipping. This is because the default primary, again, is set to overflow clip. This has to be overflow visible. Now overflowing parts will be nicely visible. Now I'm going to do one more thing, because again, just a few moments ago, I realized that we will be able to add the transform rotation here to sort of like rotate it, but this is going to look still flat. We need perspective to add the perspective distortion, which actually can be added on the card level. So I don't have to do anything. Okay, so guys, maybe I'm not in my best form, but yeah, I thought that we're gonna have to wrap it in a frame to sort of give it a 3D space. In some cases, that's actually the thing that you have to do, mainly when you have multiple elements and you want to position them in the same 3D space. But since we have a single card, it will be completely okay just to add the perspective on the card itself, on the image itself. So yeah, perfect, no problem. So default moved up, let's actually define the final moved up state. I'm gonna start just moving it up with my arrow keys. So something like this. And then I'm gonna also get it to sort of like a twisted state. So I'm gonna add perspective first of all. We're gonna bring it down to 500. That gives us the strongest, craziest perspective distortion. And then we're gonna also add rotation, 3D. We're gonna rotate it around like this. Maybe not so much, maybe 240. And then we're gonna also add the little X rotation, maybe 20, something like this. And then we're gonna also scale it up slightly. It will make it look like it's moving up a little bit. It's elevating from the surface. So maybe 0.3. So that's the moved up state. And then it will have to go back to the default. So what I can do is I can just duplicate the default, right? But before we do that, I want to clear up some doubts, because I know that you might be thinking, okay, why the hell are we actually creating this default again when we already have it here? Why do we have to have it again as a third state? Well, the reason why we have to do that is because if you think about it, we'll hover over this default and we will be able to create the interaction by just dragging here. So selecting the primary, dragging and connecting, and just adding a mouse enter effect, which is not an effect actually, it's an interaction that basically happens on mouse enter. So this gives us this effect. As you can see, it just goes up. But you can see one little weird thing is like glitching jumping. You could be asking why. Well, it's because there are some fundamental changes here that need to be applied already on the primary, which is the perspective. So here, perspective is not added, and that's why it's sort of like a weird glitching effect. So now it's going to be much smoother, but still it's quite fast. So what we'll be able to do is just tweak this a little bit, maybe 0.8 or something, 0.7. Now you're going to see it's much smoother. Great. So this is what we have. We hover over and it goes up. As you remember, I said that somehow we'll have to make sure that it automatically goes back to its default state. The way we're going to do that is we select the moved up. We first of all remove the interaction that was added here, which is a mouse enter effect. Why is this added? Well, I already told you that everything we do on the primary is added everywhere. So if we add an interaction from the default to the moved up, it's going to be added on the moved up as well. So we're going to just have to remove it simply. So we have to go from moved up to default on appear, which is kind of like automatically happening once the moved up appears. We just have to wait a little bit, so maybe 0.6 delay, right? So let's see how this actually works. We hover over and it moves that back down, and basically that's it. And actually it works quite well. We don't actually need a third variant. So if you thought that, hey Nandi, why the hell do we need a third variant? Well, you were right, because we actually don't need one. I thought that, basically my thought was that if we do this, it will basically re-trigger the mouse enter effect if we keep our cursor on the element. But as you can see, we keep a cursor on an element and it's not re-triggering. If I leave and I hover again, it re-triggers again and it goes again, but that's completely fine. So yeah, I think now we kind of have the effect that we are looking for. Maybe we can drop the perspective. So I'm going to select both images, like on the default and on the moved up variant as well. And I'm going to just set it to 1000, because the lower the value, the more intense 3D distortion we're going to have. So yeah, basically this is going to be the card. This is what we need. This is going to be the building block that we can just arrange in a circle to have the effect. Because even if I just put it like in a stack right next to each other multiple times, and the stack itself is set to visible overflow, we're going to already see that, wow, looks pretty good. However, now that I just place them right next to each other, we see a little problem, which is that we cannot really change the image. We have the same image on all of them. To fix this, we just have to go back inside of the component, and on the primary we have to select the image and turn the fill on the right, the property, into a variable. So create variable image. That's it. Now it's a variable, which means that we can set different images on different instances of the component. So here we're going to have the palm, but on the other one we might have this. And we can just upload any image that we want on each of them. Okay, so I deleted 2 of them. Let's just keep these 2. And yeah, let's just say that we have these 2 components here on the canvas. Now we will have to go on a challenge and on a journey to create a whole circle. So how do we do that? Well, the way you have to think about that is basically not by creating a circle, because you could be like, okay, I have to absolutely position each of them. Okay, I have to like rotate it a little bit. Okay, now Now it's almost a circle. I have to do this. This is not the way, right? Because this is not going to be responsive. It's not really going to work. So the way you really do this is you think about it this way. You create an arm frame which looks something like this. It's like a stack that has an image on the top and on the bottom, as you can see on the top and on the bottom, inside of a common arm frame. Once you have this, it's just a matter of duplicating this and putting it right on top of each other with a little rotation. And you're gonna get a full circle thanks to this setup. So we just select both of them, right click, add stack. We'll set the width to fit content, and then the height will be fixed. We're gonna set it to, I don't know, like it depends how large the circle should be. 600 perhaps. And then to make sure that the one image is on the top and the other one is on the bottom, we have to set the distribute property to space between. This just pushes the one to the top and then the other to the bottom. Really simple. And really important that the direction is not horizontal but vertical to make sure that these are right below each other. Now this is great. However, we're going to notice something weird. First of all, some clipping, which we can fix really easily by selecting the arm that we created. By the way, let's rename it to arm, and just set the visible overflow on the right panel. So let's just compare this, what we have here, to what we have here. We hover over this, moves up. We hover over this, and it actually, I don't know if you notice it, but it actually moves down, which makes sense because this is a circle. So, you know, all of them are just moving outwards, like not inwards, but outwards from the circle. However, here, this moves up and this moves up as well, but this should be moving down. So before actually duplicating this arm around a bunch of times, let's fix this. Really simple. We just rotate this, right? That's all we have to do. Now that's going to move down, and on the top it's going to move up. And now it's just a matter of duplicating these arms and putting them right on top of each other and rotating them. So let's do that now. So what I'm going to do, first of all, is I'm going to wrap the arm in a stack. This is going to be like the parent frame of all arms. Add a stack, not a frame, but a stack. We're going to call this arm frames, or basically full circle. Then we're going to duplicate, or actually let's just give it a size. Full circle will be set to 600 pixels width and 600 pixels. Actually the height can be fit, that's fine. And then this arm will be set to height fill. That's fit. So that's not great. Has to be fill. Perfect. And then what I can do is I can duplicate this arm, set it to absolute positioning because that's the only way I can position this over the previous one. So absolute positioning, center it with these buttons here, horizontal and vertical centering, or option H and V. And then we just pin this to the top and bottom, which basically is the same thing as setting height to fill. But since this is an absolute position element, we don't have fill. So we'll just have to use pins on the top and the bottom, meaning that it will always try to keep 0 pixel distance from the top and from the bottom from its parent, which is the full circle frame. Now I can just do a slight rotation on this, maybe 25 degrees perhaps. And that's basically it. The reason why we set it up this way is because then if we've done everything correctly, we can nicely resize the parent to change the circle size. And yes, indeed, we can do that. Perfect. Okay, lovely. So I think instead of 25, should we do 25? Should we do more? I don't know, maybe 30? 360, 25, that's not going to be great. 360, 30, 12, that's going to be great. So let's just do 30. And then maybe we can make this a little bit smaller to make them closer to each other. So yeah, let's just duplicate this, Command D, and then do a little more rotation, 60. So yeah, I'm going to just continue doing this until I have a full circle. As you can see, after just a few arm frames, we now have a full circle. You can see that we have a little larger cards, so we don't have as many as we have here. But yeah, we basically have the same effect, but it's again clipping because we created the full circle stack, but we forgot to set the visible overflow. Or if we do that, now it looks all good. Perfect. Cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly switch out the images so it looks fine, and then we're going to put the text inside of the circle. Okay, so all the images are switched, so it looks much better. And now what we're going to do is we're going to put this text in the center of the circle, which should be pretty simple. We just press Command and X to cut it, and then we select the full circle, and we simply put it within. So Command and V, and we set it to absolute positioning, and we pin it to the left and to the right with 0 pins. Or perhaps we can set it to 40-40, so we have a little padding on the left and right, or even maybe a little bit more. And yeah, maybe 100 and 100. And I think that's it. It should be good. And again, with this responsive setup, we can change the full circle size to like have a larger circle or smaller one. So it's super easy to customize, and this is why we have to always think in relative positioning, or even if you're using absolute, you saw that we actually were setting top and bottom pins to make sure that it will nicely grow and adopt if parent frame changes in size. And yeah, we end up having something like this, and it looks pretty good in my opinion. So basically that's it. If we look on the phone breakpoint, you can see that it looks okay. We could do some optimization, but first of all, hover is not something that we can do on phone. We're not really hovering. But if you wanted to optimize this, you could either make this smaller, where you can see they start like touching. So what we can do is we can make it smaller, and then we can just select the arms and scale them down. So transform, scale, and just make them a little bit smaller. But then it's going to start like colliding with the text, so you have to be careful about that as well. So maybe you now break the text into 2 lines, something like this. So yeah, you can do some sort of optimization like this if you really want to show the full circle. But yeah, I think that's basically it. So yeah, I really do hope that this video was helpful and it really showed you how you can use components in Framer, and like literally simple frames, and use them in a really smart way to create effects that look really nice. They're not too much, but they just give that little, subtle, touch of interactivity to your website and, I don't know, delight. So yeah, if you got stuck somewhere or you have any questions, make sure to drop your comments in the comment section. And yeah, make sure to also check out Framer.University. I have a bunch of components, tutorials, resources that you can use and learn from for completely free. So if you're using Framer or you're building websites or learning Framer, I think it's going to be a great resource for you. So yeah, again, that's it for today. Make sure to like this video, subscribe for more, and I'm going to see you in the next one.